So yeah, my presentation is a short, well, let's say it's a short report on my last travel trip to Guatemala. And, it's not working, wait. And maybe we know that only a few pyramids peek out of the canopy of the jungle in Guatemala in Central America, but most of these ancient ruins are still hidden by the dense canopy of the rainforest. Pyramids, roads, bridges, palaces, small dwellings, all of that has been lost for centuries. So Quantum Systems sponsored an expedition to Guatemala in April 2022 and teamed up with scientists of University San Carlos in Guatemala, Professor Danilo Calen, and from Universidad in Spain, Francesco Feto Hierra. And there's a lady called Carina Colario. She is just preparing her doctoral thesis in archaeology in Guatemala, and she is doing this thesis at the university in Spain. So we decided to support that mission, and this presentation will present the mission. Of course, I will share with you some preliminary results of this 14 days mission. Guatemala is located in Central America between Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, and the National Park Yaksha, our project area, is located in the north, very close to the Belize border. The national park has an extension of about 38,000 hectares. These are roughly 380 square kilometers. But before we'll have a closer look to this project area, I would like to give you some basic information about the Maya civilization and about our mission objectives. The history of Guatemala begins with the Maya colonization. It was 1000 before Christ to 250 after Christ, roughly. This is the start of the civilization. And there are about 57 known locations, known sites in Guatemala. Only 5 or 6 are public, and you can visit them, like Tikal, Yaksha, Nacum, Naranjo, Mirador. So there are only a few of them you can visit. And 3 of the most popular places are even in our national park, in the Yaksha National Park. So let's look at our 2 mission objectives. First of all, the archaeologists asked us to survey the 3 most important Maya sites within this national park. This is Yaksha, Nacum, and Naranjo, roughly 15 kilometers apart of each other. Why? Because the existing maps are not very sophisticated. You can see one of the best maps on the right side. This is without any scale. It's not georeferenced. There are no coordinates on it, and it's more like a sketch or an archaeological drawing. So for this mission objective, we planned 3 LiDAR flights for each of the sites. So there's a 1 flight LiDAR for Nacum, 1 for Naranjo, and 1 for Yaksha. And in addition to that, RGB flights with an oblique RGB camera. In addition to that, the archaeologists have been interested to find new and unknown Maya sites under the canopy of the dense rainforest. And we at Quantum, we knew we can penetrate this vegetation with our Cube 240 LiDAR designed by YellowScan. The only question, how to plan this big search? The time was very limited, so only a few days, and the weather in this part of the world is quite unpredictable. There are daily thunderstorms, there's rain showers, so it's not really sure how many days you can really spend on flying. And the entire area is 38,000 hectares, so we cannot cover the entire national park of Yaksha. We had to decide whether we go in sections, we fly only a part of it, we fly around the existing cities, so we have to make plans. And finally, we decided to fly search transects, like long lines along a corridor mapping, because archaeologists have a long tradition doing that. So I met a lady, she's professor for archaeology from Santa Barbara University. She was already doing it 20 years ago, walking through the forest in a straight line, 50 kilometers with a machete and just looking for something to find, just on a straight line. So we decided to fly straight lines, but what are we exactly looking for? Let's first look at that. We are looking for embedded structures. and partly embedded structures, or even structures being not embedded, standing structures, like a pyramid, which we would rarely see in a forest without any earth on it. The roots go much deeper than it looks like, and it's all about creating a proper DTM. So then doing a relief analysis with GIS, and we look later at the concrete workflow. But in general, there are 4 steps. We as Quantum have only been involved in the first 2 steps. Step 1, we planned and executed the Lidar survey. We did the raw data processing with YellowScan Cloud Station and the new Cloud Station mission, and we did the strip adjustment. In step 2, we run the automatic ground point classification, and there was some manual classification done to make sure the existing pyramids are not wrongly classified as non-ground points, which is easy to happen, so that they are just filled out as vegetation. And at this point, I would like to thank Pierre very much. Where is he? Pierre Chaponnet. Thank you very much. He helped me in the last weeks a lot, working with TerraSolid on the manual reclassification. Closer? Okay. But now let's have a look at the project data. As I said, Yaksha developed it's the largest city in the eastern Petén Lakes during the late pre-classic decade, 350 years before Christ to 250 after Christ, and expanded into an enormous city during the early classic period in 250 to 600 after Christ. Yaksha here marked red, and the green X, where the lodge is, this is a jungle lodge, is the only possible takeoff location for the entire area. There's absolutely no way going somewhere to take off an UAV inside this forest. As mentioned, we planned 3 flights with the LiDAR and 3 flights with an oblique camera with an RGB payload to map these 3 sites. And it was quite easy with the Trinity, with the 60 up to 90 minutes flight time. For the corridor mapping, the transects, we came up with a super crazy idea when looking at the map and the location for the existing sites. We have Yaksha, we have Nakum, and we have Naranjo. And when I was doing the flight planning, I just draw a line, and I went crazy by looking at the triangle, which is not just a triangle, which is obvious that you have 3 points, and it will be a triangle for sure. It's not super magic to have a triangle, but it's an isosceles triangle. And even greater, when we add the sides of Coloradita and El Carmen, we get even a greater one. The scientists there didn't really know about it because they couldn't see it. Because if we would show all the names of other smaller archaeological sites, you won't even see the triangle anymore. It's like looking in a sky of stars, and all stars are the same brightness. You won't see the figures in the air. So the archaeologists and the local people told us there's a strong evidence that the Mayas planned their cities based on astronomy and the position of the stars in the sky. And, well, when connecting Dane, Vega, Altair, we get exactly the same dimensions. And wow, maybe just a coincidence, but we went for it. The plans were made, and the team was sure that we have to follow the lines. And the lines of the triangle for the corridor mapping. And so we planned all our missions along these flight lines with a 50% overlap. So more details on this flight planning later, but what we immediately realized, this would not work in visual line of sight, and takeoff and landing is only possible at the lake of Yaksha. So there are no roads to Nakum, there are no roads to Naranjo, and therefore we had to rely on the Trinity to fly these super long distances in a really, really hilly terrain. So it's not flat at all. It's like 100 meters up and 100 meters down, and we had to stay in a very close distance to the ground for the mapping. So the challenges: long distances, hot temperature, unpredictable weather, thunderstorms coming up in a great distance, which we can't see from the takeoff location, dense vegetation, and also a hilly terrain. So, but with the Cube 240 LiDAR and the Trinity, we thought we can risk it, and we have the right tools for this mission. The Trinity performed all missions without any problem, and so did the LiDAR Cube 240. For the Cube 240, I would just like to mention 6 important specs. For those who don't know about the Cube 240, we have a super low weight, so that we can carry it on our aircraft. We have a long flight time. We have 240,000 shots per second. We have the free echoes and a precision 2 centimeters and an accuracy of 3 centimeters. And I forgot, there's one more reason, the single bottom. And you can believe me, in the wilderness, if you are out in the jungle, 40 degrees, you work from morning to night, you don't want to mess up with Ethernet cables, Wi-Fi connections, settings, you just want to fly and you just want to have this single bottom, which makes operation super easy. Just flying and collecting data. We had a 70.4 field of view, and the iBase, the 3D Cubase from Quantum Systems, did the 3D flight planning, so even that was pretty easy. At 20 meters per second, 100 meters above ground, we stayed a little bit lower. Density is roughly 80 points per square meter. So we tried to fly below 100 meters, 80 meters, 90 meters to be sure that we have all necessary data. Mission planning was quickly done. We select the right aircraft, we select the cube, and then, well, let's first do a focus on the 3 LiDAR flights to map the existing 3 areas in a distance of 15 kilometers. Most important there, that's what I always tell people when I do training, is the 5 Ps. Proper planning, prevent pissed performance. In this case, we sat there for 2 days or 1.5 days just for planning to make really sure no shit happens. So if the Trinity is 20 kilometers away and it decides to fly back, you have to make sure there is no obstacles between the Trinity and your home point. So, well, flight planning is the most important thing here. So here we can see the first flight plan for Yaksha, 5 kilometer distance to the site. The size is 117 hectares. Total flight time, 33 minutes. We can clearly see the 3D terrain following the plot. So we are doing the terrain following to keep the aircraft over the forest in a short distance. And the maximum tree height, don't forget, is 60 meters. So 60 meters trees, 90 meters planned flight above ground. So there's about 30, 40 meters of tolerance. But that's the way doing it. If we fly higher, we would not get enough ground points. Here is the second flight for Nakum. Here we can see that we have a flight towards the location very high, crossing this first ridge of mountains, then descending, flying the mission, climbing, and flying safely home back to the lakeside. This is a 43-minute mission. Last not least, the target area for Nakum, 15 kilometer distance. Notice the same one. It's Nakum. Just zoom in where we can see the calibration pattern just before arrival. We are flying the mission, and we can here again see zoomed in how nicely the Trinity is the terrain on the site along the flight path. So this is the last one, the Naranjo in the east. We have to go 15 kilometers to reach the site, then we map the site and we fly back, total flight time 40 minutes. Now we look at the corridor mapping. As I explained earlier, we planned 7 corridor missions and we split the triangle in 2 parts. We first tried to fly the triangle in 1 run, which would have worked in 58 minutes. Maximum flight time is 60 minutes, so I decided we better do 2 flights and keep the flight time around 45-50 minutes just for safety, because we only have 1 LiDAR with us and 2 Trinities, and we didn't want to risk it. So 4 rounds around the first part and 3 rounds around the last part. Why 3 rounds? Because a thunderstorm came up when we couldn't do the last one. So initially we planned 8 flights for this triangle. The first part of the triangle we flew 4 times, as I said, and then the first part we flew 4 times, and the length of this leg of this path is 43 kilometers. So 43 kilometers, 1 round, 1 LiDAR scan, no overlap, just following the first part, and we covered 220 hectare ground points with the first round in 40 minutes of flight time. This mission is highlighting again the importance of the 3D planning. If you look especially at the end of the flight, how hilly the terrain is, to keep the aircraft safe in the air and in the right distance. The second part of the triangle, we flew 3 times. And this flight plan is showing the flight plan for the first round. Again, very tricky terrain. And the length of the path, of the entire path, is 45 kilometers. We covered 180 hectares, ground points, in 41 minutes. So then it was time to fly, and just a few impressions. This is the first takeoff and landing we tried in the Yaksha archaeological site, next to a pyramid, the only place without trees. It was no fun because obstacles left and right, high trees, and later in the day we find out that there might be a better place to work. It's a lake. I first refused to fly there because it's full of crocodiles, and while you are flying, the crocodiles come out and you make sure they are in the water when you land. So that's why I first prefer to fly in the Yaksha National Park. But at the end of the day, the idea, the work with the crocodile was more relaxed than flying in the forest. Later you will see another photo that we took off from a swimming pier in the lake, which was the safest place of all of them. Right after the flight, you know all that, we transfer the files, TO4 file, YellowScan file, LiveVox file, and then the base station files from the iBase. And we used our own iBase, which was not on a good position. I know that very well. We should not put iBases on swimming locations. But if you have the choice to put it in the forest, or you put it on a well-anchored pier on a table, which is maybe 2 centimeters moving over the day, I better put it on the pier than I put it under the trees. So we worked a complete week with this iBase base station on exactly the same location, and the quality of the data was not that bad. So it was swimming, but it was moving very, very slowly and only a few centimeters. Here, what I mentioned earlier, this is a lakeside pool. Usually there's a pool inside where you can swim in the lake water with the crocodiles. And the owner covered it for us for takeoff and landing. So that was the last 2 days where we could relax at the lodge and sit on the terrace and while the Trinity was flying. Yeah, our friend Rocco is always with us. She made sure that he's not messing up with us too much. So while we are flying, while we are flying the Trinity, we are doing data processing on the terrace all day long, producing the LAS files, and then just changing batteries and preparing the next flight. After creating an SBET file with Ablanix PostPack, we proceeded with the raw data processing in CloudStation and exported the LAS file, including the automatic terrain classification. Here, this is Yaksha. This is Naranjo dataset, and later we will have a look at the final results for Yaksha. But before we look at these results, I would like to show you how we managed to work with the 7 corridor mapping flights. And you remember 4 runs around part 1, 3 rounds around part 2. And this is the new software from YellowScan, and really, congratulations to this software. I was waiting, I think, 2 months to get it because it was impossible to process my data with the normal cloud station because there's no strip adjustment on a single run. So if you always have 1 run per flight, it doesn't make any sense to do strip adjustment. So I waited and waited and waited, and then I got it, and it worked like a charm. So I'm loading flight number 1, flight number 2, flight number 3, flight number 4, flight number 5, flight number 6, and flight number 7. And then we run strip adjustment on all 7 overlapping flights, and this helped a lot to increase the quality of the data. And finally, we've been able to export the single LAS file for all the 7 flights, including the terrain classification. Here you can see some screenshots from the corners, where you can also see the flight paths, how clever the Trinity did intercept the next runs with flying a 360. And it all worked without any glitches. So now let's look at the mission summary for the LiDAR flights. We see the flight paths for 12 flights here. This is the Yaksha flight in red. We have the Nakum in yellow. We have the area flight for Naranjo in green. And then we have 2 more flights for an area called Posamaya in the middle, which was a special request from the scientists. And then, of course, we did flight number 6 to flight number 12 around this big corridor mapping. Total mission time on site is 10 hours. So total flight time, 10 hours for 12 flights. You would ask me, what's about the point cloud or the RGB data we captured? Today I can just talk a little bit about the additional RGB flights because this oblique camera payload is not yet released. So I just want to share a few impressions with you. This is one point cloud from this new payload bay processed with photogrammetry. You can clearly see the trunks of the trees. And this is quite interesting. This is a point cloud from the drone. And this is a photo I took on the ground with my iPhone from approximately the same perspective. So this is a very, very good tool to produce 3D point cloud data, for example, for urban mapping, for 3D cities or things like that. And yeah, it will come out in the next weeks. But my dear friends at YellowScan, don't worry, photogrammetry doesn't work through vegetation. And processing takes a shit long time. It's much better to do it with the with the Lidar. Some statistics. I said, well, I did 12 flights. We captured 3.5 billion of points. We covered 19 million square kilometers or 1,900 hectares of ground with the Lidar. And the table indicates that we surveyed 118 ground point total points per square meter, and 11 points per square meter average on the total area. So 118 ground with non-ground and 11 points on the ground per square meter is the average outcome of the data, which is not a regular grid, of course, but it's good enough to create a nice DTM. So I think it's something we can work with, and then now let's look at the first preliminary results, and now let's have a look at data at Yaksha. This is the AOI, area of interest. Here we have the DTM, completely cleaned up, no trees anymore, just ground data, and this is exactly what the guys at the university are looking for, to get this and then do their own analytics on the ground structures. I did some hillshade to do some first visualization, and we can clearly see here in the DTM plus hillshade what we can expect from this data set. So here in the upper right corner, we see the corresponding point cloud for the blue triangle, and the ground and vegetation. And so the ground points are colored with a color ramp, and the vegetation is green. And if we look at the lower left corner and in the bottom we have the clippings, we see the magic of Lidar, that even this hidden pyramid, which is completely hidden by vegetation, comes out very clearly. And if we can do this on an existing site, of course we can also see hidden structures in unknown sites when we fly the transects. A short video clip, point cloud, intensity. So now I take you for a flight from Yaksha to Nakum. This is the ground point data set along the triangle. So here we have a first finding. This is a hidden causeway in the forest, which is not visible from the air. Then we are heading towards Nakum. Here we see the site of Nakum with its pyramids. Then making a right turn, heading to the east. Then there's some hilly terrain. Then we will reach Naranjo and turn right back to Yaksha. You can already see some nice structures there. But this is just to visualize the density of the ground points. Now we will look at the DTM and then at the relief shade. And here we can really see what we can find in the jungle. There are some structures here. Okay. So in the GIS, we process the DTM and the hill shade for better visualization, and this is the entire data set. And now let's have a closer look at it. And now we try to zoom in to Yaksha, and then we move slowly northwards. And I just marked the findings we got, like this is Yaksha, then here there's nothing, all clean forest. We found this causeway, there's a river. So now at Nakumshai side, there are already two interesting structures. On the left side, an embedded possible structure. On the right side, we can see a circular structure. In the top right corner, I just enhanced the color contrast a little bit for the DTM, so it gets much clearer. Then we fly to the east. That looks all like normal geomorphology. Here, there are some possible findings. Here even more. This looks really promising. And here even more promising potential candidates for sites. Then we are at Naranjo. And the way back, again, some structures. But the best part is around here. If we here check the intensity a little bit and we look more detailed at the terrain we see that it's quite geometrical shape, what we can see, and it's pretty sure that the guys will find something on a ground truthing there. Probably we touched a new, bigger archaeological site at this position. Then one more little round structure very close to Yaksha. Yeah, that's it. So let me shortly summarize the preliminary results. The Cube 240, I think, is the right tool for archaeologists to search for embedded structures under dense vegetation. The Trinity, I would say, it's a workhorse, operates perfectly in tropical conditions. And finally, we identified 32 local relief anomalies, let's call it like that, on a 46-kilometer transect. So some of them might be embedded, and now they will have to do more analytics, and then we'll plan some expeditions for ground truthing. Thank you very much.